Hi everybody, it's Juan again. Welcome to the third part of our Fusion 360 basic tutorial. Today we're going to tackle two tools that are very important. We're going to tackle the Loft Tool and the Sweep Tool. So we'll be creating some more complex surfaces this time. So let's talk about the Loft Tool first. So the Loft Tool is a tool that is going to allow you to create shapes that are transitional. So you can essentially have sketches that are very different from each other, or that have changing features that are separated by a distance, and then you can loft a shape that connects the two or more profiles, thus creating a very dynamic shape. And I'll demonstrate that in a second. We're going to create a shape that is quite complex. So when you did the revolve exercise, you obtained a completely circular shape. And this time around, you're free to actually change that. So let me start here with this document. I'm going to move real quick since you already have all the basics down. And I'm going to create a new sketch here on my base plane. And this is going to be my base sketch for this exercise. So I'm going to create a sketch here on my base plane. And this sketch is going to be a ellipse shape. So I'm going to go to the Create menu here in the Sketch tab, and I'm going to select Ellipse. And then I'm going to do an ellipse that's snapped to the center point. And this ellipse is going to have about 100 millimeter, and I'm not going to be super precise. I'm not going to define all the sketches here for you since I want to move a little faster. 100 millimeter, whoops. It's going to have 100 millimeter height here, and I'm going to click once, and then I'm going to have the ability to select the width of this ellipse, and this is going to be a 150 millimeter width. So this is about the proportion that I'm going to work with for this particular exercise. I'm going to do Finish Sketch, and this is going to be the first section of a picture that I'll be designing here with you. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to create a reference plane that is offset from the original plane. So I'm going to go to the Construct menu, and I'm going to select Offset Plane. And then I'm going to select a reference plane for this new offset plane. And this could be the base plane that you drew this first sketch on. So I'm going to then drag and say this new plane is going to be, let's say, 20 millimeters below the surface of this one. And then you can actually go and create a sketch in this new plane that is sitting below, 20 millimeters below the original plane. And then we're going to create a second ellipse in this one. This ellipse is going to be a bit smaller. It's going to represent the base of our picture object. So it's going to be about the same proportion, but a little shorter. And again, I'm not going to worry about actually dimensioning all of these sketches, although you should make it a habit of actually making all of these sketches go black by fully defining them. Then I'm going to go create another construction plane that actually sits above the original plane. So again, I'm going to go to the Offset Plane tool, and I'm going to generate a sketch that's about 40 millimeters above the first one, the main sketch that I drew. I select OK, and then I'm going to create a new sketch on this new reference plane. So I'm going to go click Look At. And this sketch in particular is going to actually have a little difference to the others. I'm going to go again to the Ellipse tool, and I'm going to generate another ellipse that is roughly maybe a little bigger than the base feature. So it's going to generate a nice little waist for our picture. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is actually I'm going to start a small feature here. I'm going to go to my Line tool by selecting the letter L, or going to the Line tool directly here in my Create Sketch panel. And I'm going to draw a small triangle here. And of course, this should be symmetrical, and you can actually add dimensions to make it fully symmetrical. I'm not going to worry about making it 100% symmetrical this time around, but you can definitely go and add dimensions to make this very exact. After adding this small triangle to this side and making sure it snaps here to the ellipse that I drew, I'm going to go to the Modify Sketch tool, and I'm going to select this tool called Trim. And Trim is going to allow me to actually go and get rid of the parts of the sketch that I don't need. And in this case, if I go near this area here, you can see it marks it here in red. if I click trim here, it'll get rid of that part of the ellipse, and you can see I started creating. You can start imagining what this section is going to look like. The base of the pouring spout for the pitcher. Okay, I'm going to click Finish Sketch to complete this sketch. And if you rotate here, you can sort of imagine a shape that gets lofted between these three ellipses, and it starts forming this sort of elliptical picture that I am imagining, that I am designing. And I'm going to go and create another offset plane, and this offset plane is going to represent the top part of my picture. And I can select any of these, since these planes are all parallel to each other. And they don't need to be parallel to each other, by the way. You can actually go and create planes that are at an angle by using some of the other construct tools. This time around I'm going to give this about 110 millimeters from the base of my file. And this is going to be the top of this picture. I'm going to create a new sketch on this new plane that I just created. I'm going to go and say look at to see it. And this this time around I'm going to also create another ellipse, since the base of our picture design is elliptical. And I'm going to create another ellipse that's slightly larger, but not as large as the base ellipse that I created. I'm going to hit the escape key to get out of the ellipse tool. And then I'm going to go back to the line tool, and this time around I'm going to create a larger spout triangle, and I can actually go ahead and try and snap to this line and then drag it. You can see how I create this dotted line that allows me to snap to this particular section. I can go ahead and also use this line here as a reference to try to make this as symmetrical as possible. That looks very good. I'm going to say escape to get out of the line tool, and I'm going to go back to the modify tool and say trim, and I'm going to trim out this section here. And then I have just created the section that represents the top part of my picture profile. And if it's not clear what I'm doing, it'll be clear in just a second now that we're going to sort of engage the Loft tool. So I'm going to say finish sketch. And now let's go ahead and try to loft these into a solid object. So let's go to the Create menu, and then we're going to select the Loft tool. So when you select Loft, you'll get asked for profiles. So for this basic application of Loft, all you're going to need is profiles. There's also the option to use a guide rail to further refine this. We're not going to try this for this first exercise. We're just going to use profiles. So you will select these profiles in order from top to bottom or bottom to top. I'm going to go and select the bottommost profile first, and see it gets added here to the list of profiles. Then I'm going to touch the second profile, and as soon as you do that, you'll see that the object starts being generated. So it's created a very direct path between these two. So in this case, you can see that the extrusion is rather straight. But as soon as you select the next profile, it'll start changing dramatically. So now it's generated sort of the path of least resistance between these three profiles, and you see it started generating the pouring spout geometry now that I've selected my third profile. And now let's go ahead and choose that fourth profile, the topmost profile, and this will complete the shape of this elliptical picture body. I'm going to click OK. And now I can see that I've created this very interesting, very dynamic surface. So the great thing about the Loft tool is each of these individual profiles can be whatever you want it to be, and Fusion360 is going to try its best to connect these in the smoothest way possible. You might have to play with the size of things to prevent things like intersecting surfaces or other potential errors that you might get. If you're getting an error and something's not being generated, maybe there's something that's intersecting with each other, maybe there's a corner that's too tight, an angle that is too obtuse or too sharp, and you might need to soften up some of these shapes to get these lofted surfaces to work. As you can see, I have some shapes here that are still edges that are hard. You can go ahead and then soften these edges. So I'm going to go to the Fillet tool here in the Modify menu, Fillet, or the shortcut F. I'm going to select these edges here that are still hard edges. Oops. Select these 3 edges here. And I can add a measure. I'm going to say, let's see how 3 millimeters looks. That looks about right to me. If I look at this top view, so if this was a plastic object or even a ceramic object, you do want to have a end product that has nicely flowing surfaces. Excellent. All right, let's see if we can actually empty out this picture to actually make it into a vessel. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another fillet. I'm going to click the shortcut F, and I'm going to add a fillet here to these lines. And I might have to select these individually. They weren't automatically chained. And I'm going to say, give me another 3 millimeter radius here. The reason is I'm going to try and do a shell tool, and usually the softer your shapes are, if you have a surface that is continuous, and if you have something that's not broken or hard, and you have filleted radiuses in all of your edges, shell commands usually have an easier time. So I'm going to do shell command, and I'm going to choose the face that is going to remain open in my design, which is in this case is the top face, and I'm going to tell it to give me a 3 millimeter wall radius, and you can play with this measurement to really suit your design. And it might take a little bit for this to process.
A few moments later.
Okay, so the shell was finally created. It took a minute to do so. Excellent. So now I have a wall thickness here. And I've actually created a vessel, right? And this is not something that I could have easily done using other tools here, like the basic extrusion tools. This is something that is very unique surface that needs to be created with something like Loft Tool. And you can, again, imagine the possibilities of doing this. For example, you can add a plane that is sitting at an angle to create an angled top, create something that, snakes around, something that is banana shaped, something that is shaped like a fish, that has a lot of different sections, if you will, if you're like slicing this object at different points. Okay, so now let's go into our second tool that we want to attack, and this tool is called the Sweep tool. So Sweep tool is a little different because we're actually using a single profile, and we are extruding this profile along a specific path. So what I want to do with you is create a handle for this picture. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new sketch here. And I'm going to create this sketch on the side view of my profile. In this case, it's the front view of my design. And I'm going to create a line that's going to define the profile of the handle of this picture. So, and I'm actually going to do this by creating a bit of a more of an amorphous line, and this line is going to be a spline. So I'm going to go to the Create menu here in my Sketch tab. I'm going to select Spline, and I'm going to select Fit Point Spline. So a fit point spline is a line that is going to be created along a series of points that you define, and you can, of course, add dimensions to where these points in space are, and then Fusion360 is going to try and create the smoothest line possible that connects all of these points that you are drawing in your sketch. So I'm going to start by drawing something that is not on the edge of the picture, but on the inside of the face a little bit here. And then I'm going to go up slightly, and I'm going to create a first point. And then I'm going to create a second point. So I want this to be rounded, but I do want it to have a bit of a tighter corner, so I'm doing these first few points a little closer together. And then I will do that top corner, and then I will do a line that also goes into the picture a couple of millimeters. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and hit the escape key. And when I hit the escape key, I'm going to get this finished spline. As you can see, you get all these control points, and you can go ahead and fine tune these. Let's say I want this line not to droop, but I actually want to this line to curve upward a little bit. I can go ahead and touch any of these points in space and get these handles to actually adjust the curvature to my taste, so I can make it do exactly what I want it to do, and I can fine tune it before I move on to the next step. So I'm pretty happy of where this line is, so I'm going to say finish sketch. Excellent. So now I'm going to define a profile that I'm going to extrude along this spline, and to do that, first of all, let me temporarily hide the picture body. I'm going to expand the bodies tab, sorry, the bodies submenu here, and I'm going to hide the body 1, which is the first lofted body that I've generated for this particular model. And then I'm going to create a new plane, and whenever you create a face, or sorry, a profile for you to extrude along a path with the sweep tool, this profile has to be intersected by the line. So one easy way to do that is to go to the construct menu and say I want to create a plane along a path. So when I say plane along path, and then I select this path that I just drew, you can see that it creates a plane that is completely tangent to the curvature of the path where I'm at. And if you drag this, you can create a path, a plane at any point in this path to draw on. So in this case, I'm going to create a path that sits at the bottommost part of my section, and I'm going to say, okay, this is where I want my my plane to be. I'm going to show the picture body again as reference, and now I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch in this new reference plane that I created. So create sketch. I'm going to select the plane that I just created. I'm going to say look at. Now it's going to be a little tricky, but I want to actually go ahead and choose the bottommost point, and you can kind of see it here as the center of my profile. In this case, my profile is going to be another ellipse, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new ellipse, and I'm going to select again this bottommost point of my path, and this might be a little tricky. You might have to try this a couple times if this becomes difficult. And I'm going to stretch this ellipse. First of all, I want it to be fully horizontal, but I only want it to be 20 millimeters wide. So 20 millimeters, and I'm going to click once to then be able to select the height, and I'm going to make this 10 millimeters high, so it's like a 2 by 1 proportion for this ellipse. So 20 millimeters wide, 10 millimeters high, and it's sitting on the end point of this particular path. Okay, so one thing I noticed is when I created this, I must have snapped to something. Now my path is actually not sitting well with the plane that I've created, but I can actually move objects around in 3D in a sketch. So if I select this ellipse, I can correct its position by then typing in the letter M, or going to the let's see where this sits, to the modify menu and select move or copy, and then I can actually go ahead and rotate this ellipse to sit properly as I want it. And you can play with this to see if you get the correct result. It might be that you don't need to do this, but I'm going to actually rotate this to sort of fit in with the side wall here in the picture. I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to finish sketch. And it doesn't matter really what orientation your profile is, as long as it's being intersected or touched by the path, then the sweep should work. Excellent. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the Create tool, and I'm going to go to the Sweep tool, And then the first thing that it wants is a profile. The profile always has to be a closed profile. And then the next thing I'm going to go and select is the path. And when I select the path, you'll see a new object will get extruded. In this case, it's trying to cut. Fusion thinks that what I'm trying to do is to create a cut, but I'm actually going to go ahead and change the operation type to be a join operation to actually create material here. And as you can see, this ellipse shape actually got swept across the entire path and generating this new dynamic geometry. And you can adjust this a little bit. You can tell it to, for example, taper from one dimension to another. If you add an angle here, you can say, let me taper this 2 degrees. So then you can see at its starting point in the base, it has one measurement, and then at the top, it has a different measurement because it's sort of it's tapering out by 2 degrees. And maybe this is something that would look nice, but maybe 2 degrees is way too much. Maybe, let's see, 1 degree. I also want to make sure that I'm not poking through here on the inside face. And that looks pretty nice, actually, this taper. You could also play with things like twist angle. You can change the angle of the profile as it gets swept. So you can see here it starts being horizontal, and then it rotates as the profile goes. I'm going to delete that. That's not something that I want in my picture handle. You also have this variable called distance, and this is also controlled by this arrow here at the end of the profile. And you can choose not to have a sweep that goes the full length of the path you're using. So that's also something that's at your disposal. You see here I've generated a bit of a problem also by using the taper. You might want to check to make sure you don't encounter these issues. So maybe even without the taper, this might be an issue. Oh yeah, it's the taper that's pushing it out way past the object, so I'm generating this area here that it's not going all the way through. So I might want to go ahead and edit the path to be slightly longer to be able to go into the object as it should. I can also just not create a join operation, but actually create a new body. And when I click OK, now I have 2 separate bodies. If I select a new body, I have the picture and then I have the handle, and I can actually go ahead and move the handle body. And say I wanted to adjust this, and I wanted to actually go way more close to the body. I can also do that, and now I'm actually poking through the object completely, right? So that's something that I could fix when I actually combine these bodies together. So let's see if we can try and do this. So, all right, let's see. Let's go here to the Modify menu, and let's select this thing called Combine. And Combine is a bit of a misnomer because the Combine tool lets you add 2 objects together, but it also lets you cut one object from another. So it's a bit of a Boolean operation. It also lets you obtain the intersection between 2 objects. So you can do all these, adding and subtraction operations with the Combine tool. So in this case, I'm going to do a bit of a cut operation here. So I'm going to select the handle as the base object. Then it'll prompt me to select a tool body or a cutting object, and I'm going to select the picture as a cutting object. So I'm going to remove the picture from the handle. So I'm going to change the operation type to cut, and here it'll let you know, it'll give you a preview of the result. So I'm subtracting the picture from the handle. So I'm cutting the object into 3 pieces by using the picture as a cutting tool. Now, if I just clicked OK right now, I would obtain the 3 pieces that I want, but I would also lose the picture. The picture would disappear because I just used it as a cutting tool. But you can select this checkbox here that says Keep Tools, and that'll keep the picture in the scene even though you used it to cut. So now if you look at your bodies list, now you have 4 bodies. You have the picture body, you have this bottom nub, you have the handle, and you have this top nub. And both this bottom nub, and I'm going to command select the other nub are objects I don't need. Now, if you're removing objects from a scene in Fusion 360, deleting them will often cause problems. If you just delete data, it might be that you're actually using these objects as a reference for other features further down your timeline. So the best recourse you have is to actually go right-click them and use this function called remove. So remove is going to remove them from your scene, but it's not going to delete the data. The object will remain in the scene, if you will. So if I click remove, see how the remove operation gets added to the timeline. Right? It's something that you can unremove these objects by going back in time or by deleting them from your timeline. But for now, the object has been removed. I don't no longer have these nubs here, and I can now go ahead and use the combine tool again to now fuse the picture body and the picture handle. So I'm going to go back to the combine tool here in the modify menu. I'm going to select both the picture body, the picture handle. I'm going to select a join operation, and one important thing, I'm going to deselect the keep tools function that I just selected, because then if I don't do this, I would be left with both a combined picture handle and a picture object and handle object, and I don't really need those. I just want one object. So I'm going to deselect keep tools. I'm going to click OK, and now I have a single body in my scene that is both picture, body, and handle. Now I can go back and soften these surfaces as well. I'm going to add a fillet by doing the shortcut F. I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to say give me a 3mm fillet. I'm going to click OK. Now I see I've softened these surfaces together. And last, I can actually do the top edge. I can actually fillet. Okay, I'm going to select the fillet menu, and then I'm going to choose all of these edges here, and I'm going to give that a 1.5mm fillet. I know I have a 3mm wall, so if I use the 1.5mm radius fillet, that's going to completely round off the top of the piece. So excellent. I've created a very smooth object. All the surfaces flow well with one another. And I've successfully used both a Loft tool and a Sweep tool. So I hope this was useful, and I hope you were able to follow me and you're on your way to creating your own lofted and swept surfaces. All right, see you in the next installment.